Welcome to today's deep dive. We're really thrilled to have you with us today
Absolutely.
because today we are looking at this hidden architecture that quietly dictates almost every aspect of your life, even if you never actually see it.
Right. The things operating completely behind the scenes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are talking about choke points and control. And to map this out for you, we've pulled together an incredibly diverse stack of sources.
It is quite the stack of reading today.
It really is. We've got an update straight from the Android developers blog. We've got some truly intense energy market reports from M&I Gas Weekly and Transport Topics,
Yeah.
plus a really comprehensive Wikipedia breakdown of the massive Warner Bros. Discovery acquisition, and a TrendForce report detailing these brand new export rules for artificial intelligence chips.
When you lay all of these out side by side, a very clear, almost undeniable theme emerges.
Yeah.
We're watching a global struggle for control over critical gateways. I mean, whether those gateways are physical, cultural, or digital, the entity that controls the choke point controls the flow of power.
That is the perfect way to put it. And that's our mission today. We want to take you on a tour of these choke points.
Mhm.
We're going to track how leverage is exercised from the physical shipping lanes of the Middle East to the cultural chokeholds of Hollywood, the digital gateways of the apps on your phone, and right down to the actual silicon powering the future of AI.
It really is all connected.
It is. And to kick things off, I want to hand it over to you to look at the most immediate, visceral shockwave happening in the world right now.
Right. The physical choke points in the global energy market.
Exactly.
To understand the sheer panic in the energy market right now, we have to look at the geopolitical trigger that set it all off.
Yeah, the catalyst.
Exactly. The reporting in M&I Gas Weekly and Transport Topics, it paints a really stark picture of an escalating conflict involving a U.S. and Israeli military campaign against Iran,
Right.
which has then been followed by intense Iranian retaliation across the Middle East.
And really quickly, as we dive into the events unfolding there, and as we look at the reactions of leaders like President Donald Trump, the Spanish Prime Minister, or the German Chancellor, I want to make something crystal clear to you right up front.
This is an important point.
It is. Our goal today is strictly to map the data from our sources. We are reporting the market realities exactly as they are documented.
Right.
We are not taking any political sides here. We are not endorsing any military actions or political viewpoints. It is a highly volatile situation, and we are just here to help you understand the mechanics of the economic fallout.
That is a crucial distinction.
Right.
Because the market reality, just based on the raw data from the sources, is staggering enough on its own.
It really is.
The M&I Gas Weekly report details how this conflict has essentially choked off the Strait of Hormuz. And we aren't talking about a minor delay in shipping here.
No, not at all.
Vessel traffic through that specific critical waterway has plummeted by 94%.
Wait, 94%.
94%.
You have to really pause and visualize that. That is essentially a total shutdown of one of the world's most vital economic arteries.
Right. If the global economy has a jugular vein, that's it. And somebody just clamped it shut.
And the disruption isn't just about ships dropping anchor and refusing to sail, is it?
No, the physical infrastructure itself is taking direct hits.
Wow.
Yeah. Qatar Energy's Res Laffan liquefied natural gas facility, which is this massive, indispensable node in global energy, was hit by a drone.
And what did that do to the supply?
That single event took 19% of the global LNG supply offline.
19%.
Just gone. We are talking about 77 million metric tons per annum of capacity that just stopped flowing into the market.
Let's break down what that actually does to the raw numbers. Because the Transport Topics piece highlights that West Texas Intermediate WTI crude oil spiked 12% in a single day.
Which is massive.
The largest daily jump we've seen in almost 6 years. It brought the price near $91 a barrel. And Brent crude settled near $93.
And we are currently missing between 7 to 11 million barrels of daily supply from the market.
And the imagery in that Transport Topics piece really struck me. They noted that Kuwait is already having to cut their oil production.
Right.
Not because they want to, but because they have physically run out of storage tanks for all this bottled up crude that just cannot get through the street.
It's like leaving a faucet running with a plugged drain.
Exactly. Eventually, the sink overflows and you just have to turn the water off. So what does this all mean? How does a bottleneck thousands of miles away hit the listener's wallet?
Well, the ripple effect is massive. It's immediate, and it hits almost every sector. In Europe, the benchmark TTF gas price surged to 65.8 euros per megawatt hour.
Which is a huge jump.
Huge. And to put that in a more day-to-day perspective, European diesel futures are up over 50%.
50%. And that immediately sparks intense inflation fears.
Right, because diesel is what powers the trucks that bring goods from warehouses to your local grocery store. When diesel jumps 50%, the cost of literally everything you buy goes up.
And it's not just Europe taking the hit either.
No, Asian markets are scrambling violently right now. The JKM benchmark price for Asian liquefied natural gas jumped over 40% overnight.
Over 40%.
It hit $25.39 per MMBtu. That is like the cost of fueling an entire manufacturing sector, nearly doubling in the blink of an eye.
And China is deeply exposed here, right?
They're incredibly exposed. They are the largest importer of Qatari LNG in the world.
Right. The M&I report points out that if this blockade persists, and U.S. supplies remain offline due to ongoing tariff disputes, China is looking at a potential supply gap of 1.46 million metric tons in 2026.
That is a massive energy deficit for an industrial powerhouse. You can't just flip a switch and replace that kind of volume.
You really can't, which is why the global economy is sweating. And it's why the sources highlight several proposed solutions to try and unblock this physical choke point.
Right, there are political and military mitigations being floated.
Yeah, President Trump announced that the U.S. Development Finance Corps will provide maritime insurance, specifically political risk insurance, to vessels.
The idea there is to financially underwrite the catastrophic risk so shipping companies are actually willing to put boats back in the water.
Right. And he also proposed that the U.S. Navy will begin actively escorting tankers through the Strait of Hormuz.
Which is a classic physical deterrent.
It is, but isn't protecting 7 to 11 million barrels of daily oil incredibly complicated today? I mean, the sources point out a very modern complication to that old-school naval strategy.
Yes. What's fascinating here is how warfare has evolved since the last time the U.S. escorted tankers during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s.
Because of drones.
Exactly. The widespread adoption of cheap, asymmetric drone technology makes naval escorts incredibly difficult and vastly more expensive now. You end up in a situation where a multi-million-dollar naval defense missile is being used to swat down a highly accessible, low-cost drone.
Wow.
It provides some psychological reassurance to the market, sure, but the logistical and financial reality of playing defense like that is incredibly strained.
It's an unsustainable math problem. You can't spend millions to shoot down thousands.
You really can't.
It really highlights how fragile physical supply chains can be when a choke point is squeezed. But let's shift gears from the physical flow of oil to the flow of culture and entertainment.
A completely different kind of choke point.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the corporate warfare over Warner Bros., Discovery is a perfect modern example of a cultural choke point.
It truly is a masterclass in leverage.
Yeah.
The Wikipedia source provides a meticulous timeline of this bidding war, and it's a fascinating study in corporate consolidation. You had Warner Bros., Discovery, or WBD, sitting in a highly vulnerable position.
Very vulnerable.
They were dealing with massive, crushing debt and a severely depressed stock price. And then, in late 2025, this brutal bidding war erupted primarily between Netflix and the newly merged Paramount Skydance.
Right. And initially, it looked like Netflix had it in the bag. On December 5, 2025, they struck a deal for $82.7 billion. That was $27.75 a share.
But here's the critical detail. Netflix only wanted the premium assets. They wanted the legendary film studios and the streaming assets, like HBO. They did not want the legacy cable linear networks.
They basically wanted to strip the copper wire out of the house and leave the frame.
That's a great analogy. And that strategic choice is exactly what left the door open for Paramount.
Because Paramount Skydance did not back down.
No, they relentlessly countered. And they completely changed the rules of the game by launching a hostile, all-cash takeover bid.
All cash.
An astounding $111 billion. $31 a share. But crucially, unlike Netflix, their bid was for the entire company.
Including all those legacy linear cable channels.
Paramount was willing to swallow the whole pie, indigestion and all.
Which completely changed the math for the WBD board. I mean, an all-cash offer for the entire company leaves Netflix's partial, stock-heavy offer looking incredibly weak.
Exactly.
So by February 2026, Netflix actually withdrew from the fight, and the financial fallout of that pivot is just wild.
It's staggering.
Netflix walking away meant a massive $5.8 billion breakup fee was left on the table. And on top of that, WBD had to pay Netflix a $2.8 billion termination fee just to get out of their initial agreement.
A $2.8 billion penalty just for changing your mind.
It might be the most expensive bad date in corporate history.
It really is staggering money. So Paramount was officially crowned the winner, but the industry reaction during that limbo period when Netflix was still the presumed buyer was incredibly telling.
Very telling.
It revealed just how terrified Hollywood is of a single tech giant controlling the primary cultural choke point.
Terrified is exactly the right word. The backlash was fierce, and we aren't just talking about a few grumpy executives here.
No.
The major guilds, the Directors Guild, the Writers Guild, SAG-AFTRA, they all forcefully opposed the Netflix deal. Theater owners, represented by Cinema United, called it an unprecedented threat to their survival.
And you had massive heavyweights getting involved.
Yeah, Jane Fonda, James Cameron, they publicly came out against it. Cameron even went so far as to say a Netflix takeover would be a disaster for the creative future of the studios.
And you have to look at why they were so angry. Because this backlash happened despite Netflix's co-CEO, Ted Sarandos, publicly promising to maintain a 45-day exclusive theatrical window for Warner Bros. Movies.
Right. He tried to assure them that the cinemas wouldn't be bypassed.
But the industry simply didn't trust that a streaming-first technology company would preserve the traditional theatrical ecosystem once they had full control of that legendary library and production pipeline.
They believed Netflix would inevitably prioritize their platform over the box office. And it wasn't just the creatives who rebelled. The investors revolted, too. Activist investment firms like Ancora Holdings and Pentwater Capital Management practically forced WBD's board to reconsider the Paramount deal.
Right.
They threatened brutal proxy fights to replace board members, arguing the board was ignoring a clearly superior all-cash offer from Paramount out of some predetermined, almost irrational preference for Netflix.
Which brings us to the political web surrounding this deal. Again, maintaining our strict neutrality here, we are just mapping the documented actions of regulators and politicians as outlined in the Wikipedia source.
Of course.
The DOJ, the FTC, and European regulators were all heavily scrutinizing the Netflix deal for antitrust implications. You can imagine the massive market share a combined Netflix and WBD streaming entity would hold.
It would be a near monopoly on premium cultural output.
Right.
And the timeline we have from the acquisition source also notes heavy political scrutiny from President Trump. He heavily criticized the Netflix deal and reportedly expressed a desire for CNN, which WBD owns, and Netflix pointedly did not want to buy, to be sold, or fundamentally overhauled.
And the reporting also noted a fascinating financial detail.
Oh, the bonds.
Yes. Just days after the initial merger announcement, President Trump purchased up to $500,000 in corporate bonds from both Netflix and WBD.
When you look at all these moving parts, the guilds, the activist investors, the regulators, the political figures, it just shows you how vital this choke point is.
It really does.
And for you, the listener, this isn't just distant Wall Street drama. This massive consolidation directly impacts your daily life. It dictates what movies get greenlit for production.
Whether you even have the option to see them in a local theater.
Exactly, or if they go straight to a streaming platform. And ultimately, it dictates what you pay for your monthly subscriptions. When a few massive entities control the cultural choke points, they dictate the terms of your entertainment.
It's all about access.
Absolutely, from the big screen right down to the device in your hand, which is the perfect pivot to our final segment.
Right.
We are moving from the cultural choke points of Hollywood to the digital choke points, app stores and AI chips.
The digital realm is where the concept of a choke point is perhaps most rigidly enforced, because it's enforced by code and by hardware.
Yeah.
Let's look at the update from the Android developers blog. Google has historically run a very tight ship with the Play Store. It's a classic walled garden where they control access and take a significant cut.
Right.
But this update outlines an evolution toward what they are calling choice and openness.
Okay, let's unpack this, because they are fundamentally changing how the money flows. And they are doing it by loosening their grip.
Yes.
They're introducing a registered app stores program that makes sideloading much easier.
And sideloading is just installing apps from outside the official Google Play Store.
Exactly. They are rolling this out outside the U.S. first. But the financial decoupling is the real story here. Google used to take a massive flat cut of revenue. Now they are dropping those rates significantly.
Yes. Developers using Google Play billing in the European Economic Area, the UK, and the US now pay a baseline 5% rate.
5%.
And the service fee for new installs drops to 20%. Plus, if a developer participates in specific quality and experience programs, that rate drops to 15% on new installs.
And recurring subscriptions are down to 10% now?
Right.
And buried in that announcement is a massive milestone. Their long-running, bitter dispute with Epic Games is finally resolved.
That's a huge deal.
It is. So Google is actively giving up a little control, likely to avoid further regulatory wrath and loosening its grip on its digital ecosystem.
But the irony here is palpable.
Oh, incredibly.
Right as Google opens its walled garden, the U.S. government is building a massive geopolitical wall around something far more powerful: AI chips.
This brings us to the Trend Force report. And this is where the concept of a choke point scales up to a level of absolute national security.
Right. The U.S. government is considering a highly structured, tiered export rule for the most advanced AI chips.
Specifically mentioning powerhouses like NVIDIA's H200 and the GB300.
They are turning the silicon itself into a tightly controlled gateway.
And the tiers in this proposed rule are fascinating. They're regulating the sheer volume of processing power. If you want to export under 1,000 chips, you get a streamlined review.
Which makes sense.
Right. If you want up to 100,000 chips, you need government-to-government security assurances. But the highest tier is what really caught my eye, the 200,000 plus threshold.
Right. For massive deployments of over 200,000 chips, like the example in the report where the UK's N-Scale is buying 200,000 GPUs for Microsoft data centers, the requirements become incredibly intense.
Very intense.
The host government must actively participate in the approval process. They must allow on-site inspections by U.S. export control officials. And, most strategically, they must commit to matching investments in American AI infrastructure.
Let's stop and really think about that matching investments requirement. If you want our American chips to build your nation's AI capabilities, you have to spend your money building our domestic AI infrastructure too.
It is a brilliant and slightly terrifying form of leverage.
If we connect this to the bigger picture.
You can see the geopolitical strategy at play.
Yeah.
The U.S. is utilizing its current near-total monopoly on advanced AI hardware design as direct diplomatic leverage. They are actively forcing allied nations to tether their own technological advancement to the continuous investment in American domestic data centers.
It's a textbook example of utilizing a choke point not just to restrict an adversary, but to extract tangible economic and strategic commitments from your own ally.
Exactly. You either play by our rules and fund our growth, or you don't get the silicon brains required to run a modern economy.
This raises an important question about the nature of power in the 21st century.
It really does. Historically, power was projected through navies and control of physical straits, like we discussed with Hormuz.
Right.
Today, power is increasingly projected through the control of submicroscopic transistors on a piece of silicon. The entity that controls the fab controls the future.
And that really brings this entire deep dive full circle.
It does.
We've looked at the physical transit of liquid energy through the Strait of Hormuz, where a single drone strike can send global inflation through the roof.
Right.
We've looked at the consolidation of a century of cinematic and news history at Warner Bros. Discovery, where an all-cash bid changed the future of what you watch on a Friday night.
And we've looked at the digital flow of apps on your phone and the very silicon brains of artificial intelligence.
The common denominator across all these diverse sources is undeniable. The modern world is entirely defined by who controls the choke points.
Exactly. Whether you are navigating a massive oil tanker through a contested waterway, green-lighting a Hollywood script, or training a next-generation large language model, your path is ultimately determined by the entity holding the keys to the gate.
It leaves us with a massive amount to chew on today. But before we wrap up, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought based on the sources we've unpacked today.
As we've seen, AI chips are rapidly becoming the most heavily regulated and hoarded resource on Earth.
Yeah.
The geopolitical firewalls around them are growing higher every day. But consider this. What happens when the incredibly complex logistical crises of today, like figuring out how to dynamically reroute millions of barrels of global energy supplies around an active war zone in the Middle East, require the immense predictive processing power of the very AI systems that are currently locked behind those massive regulations.
That is a fascinating paradox.
Will the silicon infrastructure that is meant to solve our most pressing global supply chain problems become the ultimate unnavigable choke point of the 21st century?
It makes you wonder if we are building the perfect tool to fix the world bottlenecks, only to lock it in a geopolitical box we can't agree how to open.
Exactly.
We want to encourage you to think about how these unseen forces, these invisible choke points, shape your daily life. From the price of your groceries driven by diesel, to the movie you stream tonight, to the tech that will run tomorrow. Thank you so much for taking the time to learn with us today. Until next time, keep diving deep.